Hello again. What I thought I'd do this time is go through patterns and basically how to interpret a pattern. I've had so many people say to me over various Facebook pages and things that they struggle when it comes to a commercial pattern. So I thought I'd take the time to take you through the basic bits and pieces of a pattern so we can understand better how to construct a commercial pattern. Now, patterns come in various shapes and sizes. We're used to the more modern ones, which come in a packet like this. Some of the vintage ones still come in a packet, but it's slightly different on the back, how they display. And then some are reproduction vintage patterns, which come with an instruction booklet like this. One point I wanted to make about this one, in the very front piece here, it actually says here that turnings are not allowed. If you see anything like that, that means that there is no seam allowance on the pattern, so you'll need to add it yourself. So we're just going to look at the basic pattern. So this is a basic pattern envelope. It tells you the designer of the pattern, it tells you the number, and that it's a men's, and it's small, medium, large, extra large, or XX large. It also has that information on the side here, and on the front it's got pictures of the styles which are inside. This is style or view A, which is a long sleeve shirt, and here is one made up. You can see it's actually quite large, and it's not very fitted around the body. And this one here is view B, and that looks to be a short sleeve shirt. So if we turn the packet over, you've usually got a view like this on the back, and we can see that view A is definitely long sleeve and view B is short sleeve. The top, again, we've got the information about the pattern, and it tells you here what sort of fabrics it's designed for. So it's lightweight woven fabrics such as cottons, broadcloth, silks, chambray. Silk and challis are very, very light fabrics, and they would move a lot. So if this is your first time making a shirt, I would suggest a nice cotton. It then tells you here your standard body measurements. So your sizes, and in this case it's men's sizes, small, medium, large, etc. And then it tells you chest, hip and neck size. But on this one it's very good, you can put any neck size with any body size. So you could actually have quite a thick neck and a small body, or a narrow neck and a thick body, and you could still match it up. What these measurements are known as the to fit measurements. So the to fit sizes. So if you pick out your body size, so in this case let's look at chest. I'm a 44-inch chest, so 44 inches is large, or 106 to 111 centimeters. When you are picking your pattern size, if you are a lady and you usually wear, say, a size 12, which would maybe equate to a medium, check the measurements. Always go by the measurements, because the sizing on patterns and in shops are not necessarily the same. So we need to get out of the headset that you're a size medium or a size large or a size 12 or a size 14, and just check the measurements and ignore what it says above, because this is just the demographic that they've used to make the pattern. So as I said, I'm a size 44, so I would be picking a large. It tells you here that what material is required, and here it says it allows for nap. So things like velvet have a nap, they can only be brushed one way. They're smooth if you brush them one way and rough if you brush them the other. So that's what a nap is. It allows for one-way designs or shading. However, if you want to pattern match the design, or if you think your fabric might shrink because it's quite a loose weave, then you might need extra fabric, and it tells you that here. Now down here it tells you widths of fabric. Most fabric these days is 152 centimeters wide or thereabouts. Some of it's 150 centimeters or 60 inches. So this is the line that you would need to pick your fabric lengths. If you're using a narrower fabric, some still do. So things like maybe a velvet, if you're trying a velvet, might come in a narrower width. Then this tells you how much fabric you would need. It also says that you need fusible interfacing, which is at least 60 centimeters wide, and it tells you how much you need for that as well. And then at the bottom, what other bits and pieces you need, like thread. If you're making the full size shirt with the long sleeves, you need 11 buttons, and only 7 if you're actually making the short sleeve shirt. So for me, I'm making the large shirt, and I know I need here, because my fabric is 150 centimeters wide, I know that I need 2 1/8 yards for making the size I need, or 1.95 meters. And if I was making the short sleeve shirt, I'd need 1 7/8 yards, or 1.75 meters. So I know exactly how much material I need based on the back of the packet. If we switch to a lady's design here, here you can see there are more views available on here, and there's more dense information on the back of the packet. So these bits up here, the M and the black, are their information about the type of pattern it is. Sometimes you will get a WM, which is for ladies, or junior ladies, but it's just the way that they identify their patterns. So this is a misses, so that's what the M is for, misses. Semi-fitted line jacket, pockets and top stitching, etc. And various different combinations, B5, F5, and those are the sizes that they are talking about. So this is a B, so that goes 8 to 16. If it was an F, it would go 16 to 24 sizes. Again, it tells you what fabrics it's designed for, and here it says that it hasn't been designed for anything with nap, because you can see there is an asterisk here for with nap and a double asterisk for without nap, and that's reflected down here, and it says it's unsuitable for obvious diagonals. Again, if you're looking at the sizes, we're looking at the width of the fabric here. So although it doesn't say, this is the width of the fabric, and the left hand side of this packet is all to do with yards and inches. If we switch to the right, which is European, we can see 115 and 150 centimeters, and this side is metric. So you might need to switch over to this side if you're getting your fabric in metric. If you're getting it in yards, imperial, then this side. So the information is basically the same, but it's telling you here A, B, C, D, and these are the pattern pieces. So A is the jacket, B is the long dress, C is the skirt, and D is the slacks. So these are the finished garment measurements, and it tells you here for the jacket, it's telling you it's the width at the lower edge. So that bit there, which is probably your waist, possibly heading towards your hips, and it tells you that if you were making, for example, a size 16, follow it down, that it's 47.5 inches. Again here, if you were making that 16 and you follow it down, it's 121 centimeters. This is where you might need to switch and change, because although I buy my fabric in meters, I tend to work in inches. So that's here, and that's the same with B and C. It's saying that the lower edge width, which isn't necessarily helpful for a dress or a skirt. You'd want to know what the waist is. It's telling you the back length here from waist, so that's the length of the skirt if you wanted to change it. So most patterns, to say, are very similar. This is another one. This is a coat which has got 2 options. As you can see, it's got very similar information here. On this one, on the flap, it gives you body measurements. So here, which is also quite useful, this is to fit. So if you would stay a standard size 12, you would look down here and say that this would fit bust 34 inches, waist 25.5 inches, hip 36 inches, and the length across down the back is 16.25 inches. And this one here is in centimeters if you wanted it in centimeters. So you need to look at the back of your packets to see, same one here, it tells you the sizes and what it would fit. So the bit at the bottom is extra measurements, finished garment measurements, and this bit at the top here tells you to fit. And as I said before, ignore the standard sizes that you would go for and look at the measurements. Okay? I'm going to look at some of the pattern pieces now, because some pattern pieces have actual finished measurements on. We've seen on this packet it actually has finished garment sizes here, but it's not giving you anything which is particularly useful because this is only the width at the bottom edge. Right, I've opened my shirt pattern here, and these are my pattern pieces. What's interesting on this one, and it happens on a lot of patterns, not everyone, a lot, it tells me here that what my finished garment measurements are. So if I zoom in for you, on the packet it tells me that if I'm a 44-inch chest here, so we've got chest measurements 44, I need a size large. On here it's telling me that if I make a size large, the finished garment size at the fullest part of the chest is 49 inches, so that's 5 inches of ease, which means that this is a very loose fitting shirt. So if I want it loose fitting, then I'll make a large. If I want it slightly tighter, then I can make a medium, which is a 45 inches, or I can work somewhere in between. Because at 45 inches, that would be quite tight across. So at this point, let's talk about ease. So if I've measured my chest and my chest measurement is 44 inches, you would think that I would need to make a shirt which is 44 inches as a finished garment size. No, because that means it would be skin tight and it would just cling like billy-o, so it's not an idea. That's why there is ease built in, which means that the garment itself glides gently over the body, and usually it's 2.25 to 3 inches. Here 5 inches means it's a very loose fitting shirt, so I might need to cut my size down a little bit if I want it to be a little bit more fitted. So it's very important to remember that you don't want to measure yourself and they say I want something which is exactly 44 inches chest or 44 inches bust, because if it was that, it would be sitting really, really tight, so you want a bit of ease. Okay, so now I'm looking at my ladies pattern. This is the McCall's coat, which is very nice, 50s style coat. And this is my pattern piece 1, which I've cut out. Just to show you that on this pattern piece number 1 as well, we have a finished size. So if I zoom in so that you can see it, but this is for the waistline, and it tells you if you're making a 6, it's 27 inches, up to a 14, 32.5 inches. When you're working with vintage patterns or patterns that are older, you need to remember that the sizes back then were smaller. So this is why these don't necessarily equate to modern pattern sizes. So that's something to remember, but as I said, most pattern pieces 1s do have somewhere on them your finished pattern size. It may just be one measurement, it generally is just one measurement chest. Sometimes you'll see that it's waist, some other times you'll see that it will actually have chest, waist, bust, various different sizes. This pattern piece, as you can see, has all the sizes marked on it, and I've cut this at 14, which was the biggest size. What I normally do is when I'm cutting a pattern out is I normally cut it to the biggest size unless I'm not going to use it again, because then if I need to make a smaller size I can always fold. So in this case, if I wanted to make a size 6, which is the smallest size, I can actually fold along the dotted line there, press it, and then use it to cut out a size 6. If it's got curves anywhere, like along this front edge, which is a princess seam, I would just make notches and fold it over and cut it. And as you can see here, that is folded on the size 14 line, or the size 14 marked line, because the other sizes are here, and I've already folded that through. These pieces are important, your notches. I tend to notch out rather than notching into the seam allowance. If you cut into the seam allowance, you can actually weaken it, and you can weaken that particular area of the garment. So I tend to notch out, and then once I've matched those up and sewn them, I then cut them off from my seam allowance. You have various bits and pieces marked on your pattern. So here we've got a dart to actually shape the top, which comes in on the side of the bust, and all of these points must be marked when you do your pattern. I'm not going to tell you how to cut out pattern pieces. I just want to show you now the instructions and how I would go about doing something, making something from a pattern similar to this. I'll show you several of the patterns because they've got very different styles of instructions. Actually, I did want to make just one comment about when you are cutting out. If you are cutting to the size that you want, which most people do, on a lot of patterns you have different styles of lines to show you which is the correct line to cut. I'll zoom in a bit on this one so that you can see if you're making, for example, a small, it's the line which has got the most dot, or sort of the smallest dotted line. Let's just take that underneath. Then the medium, it's got a slightly larger dotted line, larger has got a longer bits of the line, and then the larger size is usually a solid outline. That's how it is on a lot of these tissue paper patterns. Not every pattern company does the same. For example, the shirt pattern that I've been working for, they are all solid lines, which means that you have to be careful when cutting out, because though it's marked on this side, it's not marked on this side. Only the neck size is. So if you are cutting this out, I would suggest that you highlight the line that you are following with a marker so that you can actually see which line you're cutting, because once it gets to this sort of point here, it can get confusing as the lines are crossing each other. If this one was dotted, then it would be easier to follow. So it's just a point. And again, make sure that you notch out if that's what you want to do, if you want to follow what I do, because again, I find notching into these, particularly on this pattern, which has only got 6mm or a 1/4 inch seam allowance, that would weaken it if I notched into it. Your instruction sheets can be quite confusing. This particular pattern has 3 different pages, but at least it does say in the top corner what page number it is. So 1 of 5 and so on. So at least you can keep them in the right order. This one, which is the shirt pattern, only has 1 piece. So this is slightly easier to follow. This particular pattern tells you how to use the multi-size pattern, and it gives you basic information. So that's something to read through. And it also tells you here, it gives you a guide to what the pattern pieces look like and what they are. Okay. This is very similar on this lady's pattern. You've got up here, you've got the front and the back of style A and style B, and you can see that style B has got a wider collar. It's the only difference on this particular pattern. And then down here it shows you the pattern pieces, and it tells you which pieces you need to cut for each coat. So if you're cutting coat A, you would cut front A, and if you're cutting coat B, you would cut front B. So that's coat A, that's coat B. So these are just the pattern pieces that you need to cut. The next bit that it gives you here, which is very useful, is your pattern markings. So it tells you here that this is the grain line. So the grain line of the fabric usually runs vertically between the 2 selvages. So there it says parallel to selvage or fold. If you've got that particular mark, it means that you need to place it on the fold of the fabric, because then you're doubling the piece up. Buttonhole markings, button markings, notches and symbols for matching seams and construction details, and that particular mark means the bust line, waistline, etc. This is very, very important. Here it tells you what your seam allowance is. So on this pattern it's 5/8 of an inch or 1.5 centimeters, and it's included unless otherwise indicated, but it's not printed on the tissue. So your pattern pieces don't have the seam allowance on them unless it is different to 1.5 centimeters. So once you've cut all your pattern pieces, check them to see if your seam allowance is different. And you'll probably find that when you come to do your hem allowance is a lot bigger. It's usually 3 or 4 inches, depending on the garment that you're making. Certainly on this coat, I know it's approximately 3 inches. It also tells you here how to adjust. So it's saying that you can lengthen or shorten these parallel lines, and those are on the pattern pieces. And it tells you information about how to shorten and how to lengthen. So that's if you need to make any adjustments to the length of it. Shrink fabric. If it's not labelled pre-shrunk, then press the fabric first. Circle layout for view size fabric width. Don't know that one. Using with nap, so there is a specific layout for one-way designs, and double thickness with fold, without fold. It just tells you various different ways to actually lay your fabric, your pattern pieces out. It does tell you that anything with a star, it says to cut the other pattern pieces first, allowing enough fabric to cut this piece, and then open fabric for cut one piece. So that's usually the single pieces that aren't doubled or matched, and they have cutting lines for several sizes, so you select the proper cutting line for pattern piece. And it suggests that you place all the pieces on the fabric according to the layout. Now, the layout shows the approximate places of the fabric, of the pattern pieces on the fabric, but I find that in most of these that they are very wasteful. So this down here at the bottom is the layout. So what it's telling you here is if you're making coat A, this is how it's suggesting you lay out your fabric pieces. So you can see that this is a narrow piece of fabric, 115 centimeters, and they folded it in half lengthwise, so selvages to selvage. So both selvages edges are here, and this is the fold line just underneath here. And it's suggesting that you cut 2 piece 1s, a piece 3, so you end up with 4 piece 1s, and then 4, 2 6s and another 4 are single cut pieces, but you need to open the fabric. So once you've cut those pieces along that edge, open the fabric flat, and then you can cut those pieces. That's with or without nap. And then the additional pieces it's saying here, so pieces 7 and 8, you would then cut like this, and then you would flip them over. So anything which is white is face up, anything which is flipped over is face down. That information is provided, just if I can show you, here. So pattern right side is white, the dotted one is wrong side of pattern, that hashed one is the right side of fabric, and that another white one is the wrong side of fabric, which doesn't help when you've got the same for the pattern piece. So this is saying that these are being laid on the right side of the fabric, so the fabric is folded so that the wrong side is together, but this is being laid on the wrong side of the fabric. It's all quite confusing. I generally don't follow these pattern layouts because, as I said, I find a lot of them quite wasteful, because here you see there's quite a big gap here, and I usually find that I can, with my folded fabric, I can actually make a better decision, and I tend to use less fabric than they recommend. Okay, so that's laying and cutting out, and then there's more on here for coat B, and it usually does with the sizes, and then it tells you how to do your interlining and your lining. So this coat has an interlining. It then has some more sewing information, your fabric key. So it shows you that in the illustrations that the darker one is the right side of the fabric, and the darker one with the hashed lines on it is the right side of the lining. And then it tells you how to do your seam allowances. So it's saying it's using 1.5 centimeter or 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and it tells you how to cut and notch, which is also quite useful when you've stitched. And then it also has here a glossary of terms, how to do E-stitch, what it means when it says finish, and what it means when it says reinforce, slip stitch, stay stitch and understitch. These particular glossaries are specific to this pattern and probably and usually to this particular pattern manufacturer. Other pattern manufacturers might use the same terms to mean something slightly different, so make sure you read your glossary. The next thing I would make sure that I do is read my pattern from cover to cover so that I know what I'm doing for each step. And then there are places where it differs. So because there are two options here, it tells you if you're making coat A and if you're making coat B, how to do it. So my next step would be to read through and then highlight each of the numbers for the view that I'm making. So if I'm making coat A, I would highlight A here and just go through, and I think this one's fairly simple in that it doesn't ask you, it doesn't have anything which is particularly moving from piece to piece. No. The shirt pattern, on the other hand, has the same sort of information. It tells you that similarly that this time the fabric is black, pattern pieces with the printed side up is white, and with the printed side down is sort of grey, and anything with a special instruction has a star. And again it tells you how to lay out your pattern pieces on your fabric. This is showing fabric right side up, and again it's the same for different sizes, the different views, and then it's got your interfacing. Again, like the other pattern, it's got your sewing procedures for standard sewing machine. On this one we've got a 1/4 inch seam allowance or 6mm, and again it tells you how to press, clip your corners and your fabric. This one is quite good because it tells me here that these are the instructions for view A, and until I see something different, which I don't on this page, this is all view A, and then at this point down here it tells me view B. So if I'm making view B, I follow view A steps 2, 3 and 4. So if I was making the short sleeve shirt and I was highlighting the numbers that I need to follow, I would highlight view B here, and then I would go back to step A, ignore that one and highlight that one, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, which is there, which takes me all the way through to, I think, yeah, attaching the collar. So 5 is the collar. If I want to make both of them, I would then highlight the various steps in different colours. So if I'm making view A might be in green, view B might be in yellow, so I know which steps I've gone through. Okay. The useful thing here with a lot of these patterns is it does show you, if you look, what to do. So if you can't make sense of the instruction, so here, it does show you this dotted line here is the stitch line. So if I couldn't work out what this was saying, it shows me here that these are the wrong side because it's white, but that is the right side because it's grey. So that's the yoke on the back of the shirt, and I pin the right sides together and then I stitch from the hem up, turn the corner and then across here. This is the same on all of these pieces. It shows you with a dotted line where you are stitching. So that's a very good tip. One of the other things that I tend to do, or I would do, is if I'm making a pattern for the first time, is once I've highlighted my pattern piece numbers, or highlighted my instruction steps, I would have a pad down the side and write the numbers out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then tick them off once I've done each step. This is particularly useful, so if you have to come back to it, if you're not doing it all in one day, you can come back and say, where was I? Oh yes, I'd done step 3, which in this case was the pocket facings and attaching the pocket to the front of the jacket, front of the shirt. So that's your basic patterns. What I would suggest is once you've got your pattern, before you do anything, read it through twice. Make a note of anything that you don't understand, if there's any terms, and then either Google them or research them so that you know what to do. I think the thing with patterns is that a lot of time the language isn't particularly useful, so which is why I always find that working from these images, particularly when you're attaching a collar like here, this image here is actually quite useful to me. So it tells me that my collar I'm pinning to the shirt where the notches match and then stitching along that particular line. So I find that sort of thing particularly useful. And in some patterns, Vogue and Burda, the instructions are a little bit more sparse, and so you have to rely on the pictures a little bit more. I'll just get a pattern out and I'll show you what I mean. So for example, this is the flat cap pattern that I made. And this instruction here, pin visor to side, matching large circles and clipping visor when necessary based, isn't particularly helpful until you look at the picture and you can see that this bit here is the visor, that dot is the large circle, and it's telling you to baste all around the outside, but the visor is up, pushed up against the top of the cap. So on the actual finished cap, if I'm matching the picture, let's just zoom out a little bit. So you can see the seam, you might be able to see the seam here, which is this seam here, and then the visor, let's just zoom out a bit more, and the visor is here. So this is the visor, and it's pushed up against the rest of the fabric, and then you would stitch along that bit there, and that's what this is telling you to do. And the next one is also not particularly clear. It says pin ribbon to lower edge of hat, placing one long edge slightly over the seam line, and turning in one edge and lapping over remaining end at centre back. Without the pictures, that would be so much gobbledygook. So you can see what it's telling you to do is put the ribbon round so it extends over the edge, and on the hat it would be on the inside. This has got the lining in it, so it's telling you to stitch there along the edge, and then when you come to the back there's an overlap. This is all stitched in, but it's folded under, and that is what this is telling you to do. So you folded under the ribbon on that side, and then you fold under the ribbon on that side, and then you overlap it to stitch it. So that's why these pictures are very, very useful. If you don't understand terms and you can't find them, join the sewing groups and ask there. And seriously, if all else fails, search for in either the sewing groups or on YouTube for tutorials, because most of these patterns have been made by people before, and a lot of them have tutorials because there are difficulties in them that people have found and decided to make videos or tutorials to make it easier for other people to follow the patterns. So that's it for basic pattern information. If you've got any questions, drop me a line. I'm going to, as I said, try and do another video at least once a month, and I might look at sizing next time, because I know sizing is a huge issue for a lot of people. Anyway, until next time, bye.